Live from Toronto, Canada, from Zoomer Radio, AM 740.
Welcome. Over the next hour, we're going to talk about something most of us have witnessed or wondered about. But the silence is deafening. The silence is deafening in the mainstream media. It's that huge pink elephant in the room. In fact, if you've wondered about this particular phenomenon, this strange occurrence overhead, hint, hint, and then you call the newsroom of your favorite radio or TV station or the newspaper to find out, hey, what's going on up there? What are these strange crisscrossing patterns I see in the sky? They'll ignore you. They'll laugh at you. They might even hang up the phone. If you call the Ministry of Transportation here in Canada, or the Airport Authority, and say, hey, what are those planes spraying up there? They'll likely plead total ignorance. So why all the silence about these strange white trails? We're told they're condensation trails, contrails. This is the normal crystallization of water vapor as it comes out of these jet airliners. Nothing to worry about. But many of us have suspected for some time that these are not normal contrails or condensation trails. They are chemtrails. The deliberate aerosol spraying. And there's considerable documentation to suggest that the culprits in the spraying, or at least the vehicles involved, we're talking about military transport planes, the C-130 Hercules in some instances. And these chemtrails are believed to contain things like aluminum oxide particulates, strontium, barium. All of these things have a very strong link to heart disease, Alzheimer's. Soil samples and water samples in places like Mount Shasta in California. The aluminum particles in the soil are off the charts. Some say the spraying is part of a joint scientific military program called geoengineering. Some say it's a last-ditch effort to stave off the effects of global warming by deflecting the sun's rays back up into the outer atmosphere. Others have posited that this geoengineering program or aerosol spraying is part of a depopulation agenda. Some suggest the chemtrails work in conjunction with something called HAARP, the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Project up in the Copper Valley in Alaska. Well, my guest tonight is the author of a brand new book. In fact, it's so new the ink is barely dry, and it's arrived perhaps just in time to shed some very important light on this issue. Let me crib from the book. We are entering a space age, but not the kind President Kennedy originally envisioned. This space age is replacing resource wars and redefines planet Earth as a battle space in accordance with the military doctrine of full spectrum dominance. This book, that I'm speaking of, examines how chemtrails and ionospheric heaters like the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Project, HAARP, in Alaska, services a full spectrum dominance. This revolution in military affairs needs an atmospheric medium to assure wireless access to the bodies and brains of everyone, anyone on planet Earth. From heat-seeking missiles to a form of mind control. How sinister are these technologies? Are we being prepared for a global village lockdown? The recent release of NSA records have reminded Americans that eyes in the sky are tracking us as supercomputers record the phone calls, emails, internet posts, and even the brain frequencies of millions. Ilana Freeland's startling book sifts through the confusion surrounding chemtrails versus contrails and how extreme weather is being geoengineered to enrich disaster capitalists and intimidate nations. A deconstruction of Bernard J. Eastland's HAARP patent points to other covert agendas such as global smart grid infrastructure, that enables access to every body and brain on Earth, a transhumanist future that erases lines between human and machine, and nanobiological hybrids armed with microprocessors that infest and harm human bodies. Over the years, Ilana Freeland has been a Waldorf school pioneer, storyteller, lecturer, writer. She's written for alternative publications all her adult life to give suppressed issues a voice. For the past 2 decades, she's ghostwritten several books on diverse topics and edited the stories of survivors of MKUltra and ritual abuse. She's the author of her own Sub Rosa America series, a fictional history of the United States since John F. Kennedy's assassination. In 1996, she was awarded a Master of Arts in Great Books from St. John's College in Santa Fe, New Mexico, including honors for her thesis on historiography. She now lives in Olympia, Washington, and has just finished writing Chemtrails, HAARP, and the Full Spectrum Dominance of Planet Earth for Feral House Books, available for purchase June 10th of this year on Amazon or in local bookstores. And it's a great pleasure to welcome back Ilana Freeland. Ilana, how are you?
Hi, Richard. Thanks for having me.
Let's do some quick definitions here. First of all, explain what HAARP is exactly. What does it do? Where is it?
Well, I'm sure that your readers have heard that the installation in Gakona, Alaska is closing down. And perhaps they think that now we're done with this terrible technology that is actually Tesla's darkest dream. But it's not true. And in the introduction to the book, I make it very clear that the term HAARP must refer to a global systemic technology that is in place and being added to daily. This is the beginning of a technology far beyond the resource wars and the final oil, the oil wars. This is what I think will be remembered as the age of technology, the age of electromagnetic technology. And HAARP is just phenomenal in the agendas that it serves.
And so the idea, you have this array of these radio antennas that are blasting the ionosphere, and some have contended that it can be used to create earthquakes, hurricanes, tornadoes. It can move the jet stream around. It can cause droughts. It can cause, you name it, just about any weather phenomenon. It can create that weather. It can manufacture the weather. So
yes.
How do these HAARP installations, because as you say, it's gone global. I mean, maybe they shut the one down in Alaska, but there's, many more out there that we don't know about. But how does HAARP work in conjunction with the aerosol spraying of, say, aluminum oxide and barium and strontium? How do the two work in conjunction? Can we get into that a little bit?
It's really important to understand how it works. What you're talking about, the microwave heaters, they're, of course, striking the ionosphere high above the Earth. And in the ionosphere, there are many ions of electrons loose. And the heat, to heat the ionosphere, is to stimulate the production of more electrons. And then this stimulation done by the microwave heaters, the ionospheric heaters, is then steered for the variety of agendas. And you've mentioned a few. You've mentioned the weather agenda, and that is crucial to weather warfare, economic warfare, the globalization of all nations, bringing them under submission to various networks of, like the Bilderberg, the Council on Foreign Relations. As the heaters, the heaters up in, say, for example, in Gakona, Alaska, By the way, a new HAARP is going in down at the Arecibo Observatory down in Puerto Rico. They go up, they balloon out the ionosphere, the heat forces the ionosphere to bloom and up. It drags the atmosphere up along with our jet stream. And then down the magnetic lines of force come the now very, very activated and additional particles. These accelerating particles come down, down, down. And now another heater comes in that can strike it in a way that Tom Bearden talked about interferometry. And this is an interfering beam. And by having two beams from another installation, two other installations, nothing to do with the Gakona shifting of the microwaves up to the ionosphere, then they can steer it dually. And this is how they will utilize fronts of weather. They can create hurricanes. They can create tornadoes. There's a way to create cold fronts or warm fronts. And this was, of course, promised in the document Owning the Weather in 2025, the military document that is among the appendices of the book. And we are there.
Yeah, they're ahead of schedule. They're way ahead of schedule, Elana.
Well, they always do that, though. They'll put it years in advance, or they'll use words like will, would, could, and when it's already happening. I mean, I envision science as being approximately, maybe I'm being too conservative, 50 years in advance of what we're being told. So it's not just about the weather, though, and that's what I try to do in this book, is I perceive this book to be a primer for everybody who are well-versed in chemtrails or have been wondering about them or are just coming to observe something strange in the skies overhead and noticing how their lungs aren't working as well as they used to. It's for people to get just the bare bones of this technology that is crucial. And when these particles are coming down, now to ionize the atmosphere for all the wireless transmissions that it's needed, one of which is, of course, is drones, now come the chemtrails. And these are filled with conductive metal particulates, and the polymers are separate, but yes, there are polymers as well. The metal particulates are very important because they can stimulate the accelerated particles to accelerate even more. And so this making our atmosphere, ionizing it and keeping it ionized, because of the force of gravity, these particles will fall, so they have to be renewed daily. These particles can be used to steer the weather, to increase the wind factor of a hurricane or a tornado, and they can also be used for communications. And, of course, the military is very fond of what they call C4, and that's command, control, communications, and computers. So now everyone's been sold a cell phone. Everyone's accustomed to Wi-Fi as being something that is a birthright, and yet these towers and our radio stations and all of the power lines and all of this that we're supposed to grow accustomed to, while we're now breathing these metal particulates that are conductive, and they are in our lungs, they're in our bloodstreams, they're in our bodies, now we are part of the experiment of this ionized atmosphere. And that's crucial for people to understand. I go through the book and look at it as mostly experimental. And you'll see if you study different phases of this, it's been going since about 1995, this latest thrust of the Chemtrails HAARP, dump and pump, I call it, is really about finding out how people will survive in an ionized atmosphere. This is crucial to them. Not that they care that some of us die or that we're ill, because of course it makes the medical industry rich. That's not a concern. But they do, I'm sure that many hospital and clinic records are being scanned and hacked in order to see what's going on with people now that they're living in an ionized atmosphere. And it has to be re-ionized all the time.
Well, if you ask anyone out there, when was the last time you saw a completely blue sky? I mean, it just doesn't exist. I remember as a kid, there were days there was not a cloud in the sky. And today, in 2014, for the last, as you say, last 15 years, maybe 20 years, there's never a day where there isn't some kind of strange, it starts out as maybe a thin white line, and then it gradually expands, and pretty soon you've got this very unnatural-looking haze floating around up there. I remember I was up in Northern California, and I was interviewing Rosalind Peterson, who's a chemtrail watcher, and we sat there and watched as a plane went by and left this thin ribbon of, it was a chemtrail, and then we watched. She said, "Now wait." And he said, at the end of the interview, let's see what happens to it. And sure enough, 2 or 3 hours later, it was like half of the visible sky was covered in this strange haze. I guess ostensibly it's blocking out the rays of the sun. But what is it? What are they doing? Are they in California, for example? Are they creating droughts? Are they trying to drive farmers off the land? What are they doing?
Well, yes. Again, experimentation is ongoing. Of course, Dane Wigington has done a superb job of speaking everywhere about the aluminum factor going on and ruining the soil and the trees in Northern California. He lives at Mount Shasta. It may seem strange to people that our own country would be destroying our own country and people. But the military mind is dedicated to a full-spectrum dominance. And so many things can only be done at home. They can't, even though NATO has been completely compromised for many years, they still can't go into other people's countries and do what they can do here. An example would be Hurricane Katrina, the super hurricane back east. These are done in our own country. And as I point out in the book, and in California it would be the same, disaster capitalism is now being supported so that when you have disaster in your experiment to see what happens, you can then bring in rich contracts for Halliburton and all the military-industrial complex. And they're not concerned on that level. And I think it's important for people to realize that we have to think on a different level than a decent human kindness kind of American who thinks that, of course, we are here to respect each other. We've all been trained and conditioned to do that in our schooling, et cetera. But our leaders are, meanwhile, preparing for the future. A future that they themselves will write.
Well, you mentioned the disaster capitalists that are creating the disease in order to offer the cure. And one of the things that I understand, disabuse me if I'm incorrect here, but as I recall, when you put all that aluminum into the soil, it alkalizes the soil. And so then you've got these Monsanto and other companies that are creating these seeds and these plants that thrive in that kind of soil, but everyone else's crops are failing miserably. So they create the disease, and here's our cure. buy our seeds because our seeds will thrive in this type of soil.
Yes, and the aluminum is particularly attractive to them, even more so than the barium. Barium is for a different purpose. The aluminum is attractive because of its surface area. It has 4 times the amount of surface area in a nanoparticulate size than any other metal. And so it's important for the conductivity of the atmosphere, and they're willing to pay the price for soil and the loss of trees because now then they'll have Monsanto have an aluminum-resistant fertilizer and seed and blah, blah, blah. So this is, it's kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul, but it is how the military industrial mindset works. And now that the economy has been lowered, and that has been very purposefully done in that slow-boiling frog way, then now they want to, turn disaster capitalism into a moneymaker. And I don't know if you know this, but weather derivatives on Wall Street are big bucks. And we're talking insider trading, the same thing that Enron got caught doing. In fact, weather derivatives started at Enron, ironically. So this whole scheme to keep a money flow going at the expense of the earth, at the expense of people, is how this is going to work. And this is, to me, this is not an overnight thing that's going to end. It's the same as in the history chapter where I point out, with the help of Dr. Rosalie Bertell and Nick Begich and Jean Manning, in their wonderful chronology of all the things that have been done without our knowing are being done to us, has been going on since the end of World War II. I mean, this is all Cold War stuff. Cold War's over, but now we've got, a chem war. And I think that what Dane has realized, which I'm really grateful, I saw a headline that indicated this on his site, that this is an assault. This is an assault on the earth and her peoples, on the atmosphere, on the troposphere, on the magnetosphere, on the ionosphere. I mean, it's mind-boggling given that we are a part of the cosmos, and if something goes wrong, and I underline the word if, then what will happen to our moon, our sun? I mean, beyond oceans, beyond our rivers and our land. This is Tesla's TNT, his magnifying transmitter, or as it used to be called, a Tesla howitzer. This is Star Wars. It is bearing fruit. And down here, the fruit is very bad.
I want to get back to HAARP and how it relates to mind control. And my understanding is that that HAARP, these HAARP-like installations, which are not everywhere, but it's not just the one in Alaska, as you pointed out, Ilana. They can generate they can generate radio frequencies up to 435 megahertz, which is somewhat similar to sort of the background of human consciousness, which also operates in that range, does it not?
Well, the way I think of it, I'm sure you're right, but the way I think of it is that HAARP is particularly good at long-wave ELF, extra-low frequency. And extra-low frequency acts very powerfully on biofields, not just the human mind, but on our entire biofields. And that is some of the research, and it was through his research that Clifford Carnicom has done. Life set me up very nicely in Santa Fe, where I lived for 5 years, and I was friends with Clifford and his wife, Carol. And I became involved in Clifford's studies of these pathogens that are being piggybacked onto the polymers that are floating down with the chemtrails. So you have the barium, the strontium, the aluminum, and other things. I just talked to a woman the other day who said that her friend was telling her about high cesium in her blood. So Clifford added to that a wonderful, and I devote a whole chapter to Morgellons, as I'm sure you're familiar with the term.
Absolutely,
but
yes.
Now I understand how it works and how that is tied to the mind control piece. And to put it very briefly, as we breathe in these particulates, some of them are actual nanofibers created in laboratories that are Clifford now and then calls hybrids. They are very organic, but they are inorganic, and they have been programmed because they have sensors in them on a nanoscale. Just remember that we're talking submicron. They have sensors. They have microprocessors in them. So what I'm saying is we have all breathed these, not just the people that have the terrible Morgellons symptoms. They are in our bodies, and they can be communicated with if someone chose to do that. So this is how I see that HAARP is going to connect with mind control. We're talking frequencies, and these frequencies are ELF frequencies. They're coming in long waves, long pulses. They're even pulses, and as Dr. Robert O. Becker so brilliantly pointed out, cyclotronic resonance is how to gain the human mind. And this is probably my greatest concern, Richard. Yes, the weather and all that, it's more than big boys with toys at this point. But this possibility that our nervous systems are being plugged in via these microprocessors on these hybrid fibers is very, very, scary. What can I say? When I first started doing this, I would just sit in awe and stare out the window. Now I feel, in the book, what I did is I laid out some things that people can do to help themselves, mainly their immune system.
Ilana, before we get into some of the remedies here and how we can defend ourselves against this full-spectrum dominance and the effects of HAARP and chemtrails, I just want to spend a few more moments talking about how this mind control can work. Now, are we talking about, you can't focus this on one individual or one neighborhood, or can you? Is it more of just sort of a general malaise, like to control the entire population, to dumb us down, to make us docile, pain compliance, these sorts of things?
Well, that's an interesting question. I do tend to think of it as a frequency-based technology that could easily broadcast with all the cell towers, the old Gwen towers, the NexRads on radio station towers, could easily broadcast a violence frequency into a city neighborhood, and that wouldn't be the entire city, just a certain neighborhood, when everyone just goes nuts. All right, that could happen. Because the point is, Richard, that the atmosphere has to stay ionized for all the C4, command, control, communications, computer. And computer would be cyber warfare, right? So yes, you can do that for a neighborhood. All right, maybe a ghetto or something like that. Now, as far as individual could work that way, I suppose, with a dedicated satellite and towers that you could triangulate with. That's already being done. It's mostly that HAARP chemtrails creates the atmosphere in which anything can be done for military-industrial agendas. That's how I read it. But the Morgellons creature, that adds a new dimension because we have them in us. We have breathed them in. They are very, very tiny, but they are alive. And in the chapter on Morgellons, it's a crucial chapter, and it's not a happy camper, easy answer chapter, but Clifford Carnicom has done all the research to nail all this down. And he has had 180-some military alphabet soup agencies hitting his site over and over and over again to see what he's coming up with. I see that there is no way. I have it in me. I saw them in my blood slide. These little guys love iron, and they love hemoglobin. So they distort our blood cells. But, as I say in the book, to live our lifestyle now, not for convenience, not for safety, not for a great career, but with our immune system at the very top of our list, the very top, where we are taking good care of our bodies. And it's, to me, I guess I'm one of those people that I look at a glass and I don't see that it's half empty. I see that it's half full. I've always been like that. And this is forcing us to really become responsible for ourselves and not look to the great white doctor in the medical establishment, not to look for a drug, a happy drug that's going to take away our woes. This is our responsibility. And I am full of goodwill toward this. Because do I think I can stop this? No, I can't. And it is a vast experiment. It's like cell phones are a vast experiment where we're putting transmitters up to our brain. I won't go into that now. But this is also a vast experiment. What happens when various microorganisms that are produced in labs, artificial microorganisms, are inserted into the human biofield? What happens? And that's what's being studied. And I'm sure they're taking notes madly as they hack into people's medical records and see what's going on.
Well, short of living 24/7 in a Faraday cage, because we are swimming in an electronic smog, and there's no escaping it. If you live in a city, you probably know. You're within 100 meters of a cell tower wherever you are. And we have wireless internet in the public square, in all of the Starbucks. You cannot escape it. So what do you suggest that we do, Elena?
Well, what I'm doing, I suppose, is what I'd suggest. I don't own a cell phone. I always tell people that I'm not that important. I wear a diode. I order diodes for my family from a certain place on the web where it didn't look like it was a placebo. I have a friend who sends me power stones. I surround my computer with anything and everything. And I watch my lungs because that's where if I could be inappropriate, also the feces. You can smell metals in feces, and then to think, well, what did I eat yesterday? And to really take responsibility to lower those things which I feel weaken my immune system. And for me, it has to do with dairy, sugar, four-legged meat, guys. I don't eat any of those. And when I do, my lungs suffer right away. And so I then will ameliorate that the following day with my consciousness. I will make conscious decisions to help my poor little lungs out because I can't eliminate it. It's in the air. This is this has got to be one of the most powerful experiments going, and that Americans, more than Europeans, are oblivious to what is going on over our heads and what is, you can even see it in the sky, Richard. You can see it when it's dropping. It's like a veil. And you know those are the particulates coming down. And yet we still insist it's a conspiracy theory. We still wait for some astrophysicist or plasma physicist or president to come forward and say, yes, this is what we're doing. Well, that's not going to happen.
I saw some interesting...
That's why I took the bull by the horns and wrote the book. I'm not a plasma physicist, but I'm a very good researcher, and I tried to do my best to give people the tools and the keys by which they know what's going on and they can take responsibility.
I saw some interesting documentation which showed the admissions to hospital emergency rooms in Los Angeles County and Orange County, several documents, and the spike in admissions for things like high blood pressure and some sort of a cardiac event after a period of heavy spraying of these chemtrails. So
yes.
It's quite remarkable. And obviously, you know, people will say things like, well, if the end game here is depopulation, they're not doing a very good job of it. But I don't think the end game is to kill everybody off. It's to keep us perpetually sick, chronically ill with upper respiratory ailments and dependent on pharmaceuticals.
Well, it's to run open field experiments. That's the way they talk about it. This is open field experiment. And no, they don't want to kill all of us. They might like it if the weakest of us sort of drop dead, and the rest of us they will study to see, gee, how did they make it? I mean, that's really the sort of deadened consciousness that is running our science now. I'm sorry to say, which is why, of course, you know, I quote scientists in this work, but I try to quote the ones that seem to be actually thinking and responsible for their humanity.
Can this HAARP be used to make people more docile? For example, you know, there was something that was supposed to happen in Washington over the weekend. It was called Operation American Spring, and they were hoping to get somewhere between 10 and 30 million Americans marching on Washington, demanding the resignation of all of the leadership, including the White House and the congressional leaders and so forth. And they got several dozen people. People, there seems to be, despite what's going on out there everywhere, a lack of moral outrage. Is that due to HAARP?
Oh, you can do that easily with frequency. And look at Ukraine. Look what happened to them. Was that frequency? I mean, that's always my first question now.
Excellent point. And what about sort of dumbing us down? Can that be achieved through HAARP?
Well, think about what our cells are going through right now in the assault they're undergoing, and our immune system, our brain cells. These things are going through the blood-brain barrier. They're so tiny. The aluminum is going through our blood-brain barrier. What can this possibly do but dumb us down? I mean, just on that alone. Not thinking of any nifty little frequency that could make us stupid. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's why I don't, my politics have changed. I'm not looking at things like I used to of different political movements and this must be because of so-and-so, Putin and this and that. No, I'm thinking the technology, and when I listen to leaders talking and what they say to Obama or what they say to their people, I can often hear that they're saying something to us like a warning, but not able to speak, because, of course, it's very dangerous to speak of these things.
Well, I think you're right. I'm long past the point of looking at the world or politics in terms of, you know, Democrat versus Republican, liberal versus conservative up here in Canada, right wing versus left wing. It's really it's a charade. That's for public consumption. That's the window dressing. There is no left wing or right wing.
Brzezinski told us years ago, technocracy. This is a technocracy, and technology is being used on us. And it's just a matter of waking up and deciding what we're going to do, not wringing our hands and being afraid, but it's a reality. What is our next step?
You call it a global village lockdown. I guess that's the end game. And if global village lockdown is 12 midnight, how close are we to midnight?
Well, I think it's being done with a slow-boiling frog way, and you mentioned the sort of people who are not doing anything and not showing up. I mean, we may already be there, and it's just a matter of degree. Just a matter of degree. I mean, they want people to work, and they don't want people to go to school, obviously, because it's absolutely prohibitive now, except for the elite classes. So I'm imagining we're already in it, and for me, life is still pretty good. I'm still able to think. I'm able to write. I'm able to go out and see people. And I think we need to count our blessings and meanwhile care.
All right. Well, Elena, we appreciate it, you spending some time with us, and congratulations on the book, just in time. Chemtrails, HAARP, and the Full Spectrum Dominance of Planet Earth. Good speaking with you again.
All right. Bye, Richard.
Bye-bye. Elena Freeland. All right, my website, your portal to The Conspiracy Show. Don't forget to subscribe. We're closing in on the 500 mark, and then I'll start publishing the weekly email, richardsyrett.com. Say hello on Twitter, @RichardSyrett, and as always, follow the truth.